When it comes to the Reckoning series on Netflix, episode 2, in my opinion, was the hardest to watch. You have Biggie fans, you have Tupac fans, but I think what we all found in common was some shady dealings. You have kick in the door, waving the 4-4. All you heard was Papa, don't hit me no more. Compared to I came to bring the pain, hardcore to the brain. Let's go inside my astral plane. The most epic personalities that hip hop has ever seen. Let's see how that shook out in episode 2. In episode 1, we talked about how Sean Diddy Combs built a shiny empire out of charm, hustle, and a whole lot of bad boy for life branding. Tonight, we're talking about what that empire allegedly cost. We've got attorney-client privilege drama this week, a cease and desist to Netflix, 50 Cent cracking jokes on MSNBC, funeral-looking flowers being delivered to 50 allegedly from Puff, and a pattern of artists, executives, and even street dudes saying the same thing. He never paid me. And in the middle of that money trail, the first New York shooting of Tupac, the Vegas incident, the deaths of both Tupac and Biggie. I want you to remember this as we go through this episode. Was this robbery or was it business? And who keeps paying the bill when the music stops? Before we even get into Pac and Big, let's talk about the legal smoke around this documentary. There's an attorney-client privilege issue hanging over a lot of these conversations. And behind the scenes, a cease and desist letter was sent to Netflix. That, to me, says two things. Someone is worried about what's being said. And on top of that, you have 50 Cent on MSNBC basically saying he wanted to be in this documentary. Of course he did. This is the same man who will turn anything into a meme and a marketing funnel. Genius. If there's a story about Diddy and violence and money and betrayal, Fifth is not just watching. He is the executive producer. Let me just say that Roger Bonds was saying that the only reason 50 was able to find the guy who released this footage was because Diddy allegedly never paid him.
This your bonds. Yo, man, how 50 get? Blah, blah, blah. Yo, Puff, take this self doing that. Let me explain something to y'all. All right? Whether it's NDAs, whether it's whatever. When these young boys come in, first of all, he only deal with young videographers because he want to rob them, and he know that they want the opportunity to follow Puff Daddy, P. Diddy. They want that opportunity. So they get him at a low price anyway. But when you stay out so many hours a day, Puff wants a videographer with him 24 hours a day on call. Whether we on a yacht, whether we on a ship, wherever we at, he wants to videotape that, right? So now, they come to agreement. They come to whatever the pay is going to be. But then it be so many hours on that invoice that he don't want to pay. He gets in touch with the office. He gets in touch with the chief of staff. Yo, what is this I'm paying? What is this I'm paying? You know what you paying. You was outside all of these hours. It's 160 something hours in a week. You was outside 140. That's the invoice he put in. So now, being if you got a contract and he don't stand to that contract, guess what happens? He could do whatever he want to do with that footage. So now that footage goes to the highest bidder. And 50 had to be the highest bidder to get there. Yo, this is business. You know what I'm saying? Everybody ain't in love with you. Everybody ain't dedicated. Everybody ain't loyal to the point of stupidity.
So again, it's not just Diddy the mogul. It's a pattern you hear over and over. I did the work. I was loyal. And I never got paid what I was owed. That's where we're going to sit for a majority of this episode. Because when you start stacking those stories next to the violence, it starts feeling less like random chaos and more like a business model. And granted, I know there's a lot of Diddy supporters and we're hearing both sides of it. Let's go back to the first New York shooting of Tupac. We have Little C's and Pac himself describing what happened in that Quad Studios lobby. Pac gets hit 5 times. They said it was robbery. However, Pac said this: an $80,000 Rolex, jewelry, money was left behind. Okay, But let's pause. If this was a robbery, we should be able to answer some basic questions. Black's Law Dictionary is what most of us in the legal world use as our Bible to describe crimes and define things in legal terms. But in general terms, robbery is defined as illegal taking and property from the person of another, or in a person's presence by violence or intimidation. Now, the questions become, what exactly was stolen? Who was charged, if anyone? Where's the police report? We have similar questions in a lot of these stories. Big violent act, but then the paper trail gets real thin. Hawk ends up leaving the hospital after being cleared. He was shot 5 times. Survives, and he walks out. Pac believed it was a setup. In the background, the business side is still moving. All the artists, all the people signed to this man, Diddy. And we start to see the same theme. Other people are quietly saying, I never got paid. Let's shift gears and talk about Craig Mack, because he was a big part of episode 2. Craig was one of the first big artists on Bad Boy. It was amazing that his wife came on to keep his legacy alive and tell the story about what happened to Craig. Craig was looking at going to death row. That story about them being in the club and him asking Diddy for money, pulling out a money wad and giving him $100 bill, just $100 bill. Your artist who literally has put together a song that has global impact, and you give him a Benji. Now we're going to talk about Kirk. And in episode 3, I'm going to go in on this. But for you watching, dear viewer, let me just say this. I went through the Kirk Barrows lawsuits, and there are a few. He sued Diddy, lost. Appealed it, lost. Kirk also sued the mom in February of 2025 over that 25% that we talked about in episode 1. It's a current civil case that's still being litigated. And then in September of 2025, Kirk sues Diddy, but now we're talking about some things that seem a little fill in the blank. Now in episode 2, we talk about a story of someone showing up with a baseball bat in a suitcase demanding 25%. Who is that? It's Diddy. Why did you need the 25%? Why couldn't you go to mama and get the 75? We hear about someone wanting the 25%, claiming they put money in and now they want their cut. If that story is accurate, you're looking at a business culture where violence and intimidation are standard tools of collection. That's not just messy artist contracts. That's a whole different category. I want you to tuck that away as we shift to the West Coast, dear viewer, because the pattern doesn't stop in New York. Now we bring in Suge Knight. In the documentary, though, we get references to Suge having a side piece in Atlanta and an associated shooting there. Yet another example of violence rolling around these men while the business keeps rolling. Then we move to Tupac's star power. By this point, Pac just isn't a rapper. He's a global figure of movement, and he drops Hit 'Em Up, which is basically a nuclear diss track. Now, giving you some context, Suge and Pac really started talking while Pac was still in jail. Pac was looking for great representation. Pac was fiery as a rapper. He knew what happened to him, and even though he was close with Biggie, the issue between Diddy and Pac was happening behind the scenes. So Pac signs with Death Row. Now you have the Source Awards. The Source Awards was hosted in New York City. Suge said something that's controversial. He says, hey, if you want to come to a label where the executive ain't always in your video doing all this and that, come to Death Row. Diddy responds when it's his time on the stage and says, I'm happy for everybody, no problem. I'm a black man supporting other black men. Now, when Pac puts out Hit 'Em Up, that record pours gasoline on everything. You also hear about the Southside Crips. We learn about Keefe D, and Lord knows on this channel, I have covered Keefe D ad nauseum, and the idea of protection on the West Coast when it comes to the Southside Crip. And then this name comes up, Eric Von Zip Martin, allegedly the person who connected certain people to Crip protection. If it's true, and again, we're dealing with allegations and law enforcement narratives, then you don't just have a record label owner. You have a man allegedly doing business in a world where street politics, gang money, and music money blend together. Now, Keefe's proffer session footage, where he said he was indicted, arrested, and now is still sitting in jail for the murder of Tupac Shakur. The important thing, and what a lot of people don't know, is that Keefe D also has been diagnosed with colon cancer, but like he's still going to stand trial for Tupac's murder. Then there's Greg Kading. Some of y'all in my audience do not like Greg Kading. I've seen the comments, but we can't talk about Keefe D's arrest, Pac's murder, and Biggie's murder without acknowledging that a lot of public narratives come from Kading's investigative work and interviews. According to Kading, there were several conversations between Diddy and Zip about street-level moves, what was being requested, who was supposed to be protected, and how much it would cost. Diddy has denied ordering any hit. I need to say that clearly. But when you stack Keefe D's own words, the money trail, the protection narrative, and the long pattern of people saying he never paid me, it starts to look a little suspicious. You start to see why people are looking back at this era with fresh eyes. And it doesn't stop with Tupac. Then the doc hints at this. Biggie never wanted to go to LA after Pac's death. Bad Boy knew that they were not necessarily welcome in LA. Biggie was scheduled to have business dealing in London, and he had concerns about the West Coast trip. Kirk Barrows was the one who actually talked about that in the documentary. There's talk that Sean pushed for the trip, that business interests, promo, visibility, money outweighed the safety concern. Then we arrive at Biggie's death. Here, another young black man, 24 years old, murdered. No one held criminally accountable. We even get conflicting stories about who paid for his funeral. That has been the talk of the town this week. You get one narrative that the family paid. We're going to fast forward to the Breakfast Club here saying that that wasn't true, speaking to somebody who was closely involved with the estate. If the question about who picked up the bill is on the table, it says a lot about what kind of support was felt or wasn't felt when the cameras were gone. Then there's a Rolling Stone moment. You get this idea that Diddy took the cover, that he knew the power of being front and center on those magazine moments, even at the expense of the artist. As a viewer, this entire episode is just wild. Like, the whole thing is just crazy. But as a creator and an entrepreneur, I'm just gonna be honest. If what is said about Diddy here is true, this episode makes me sad. Because what I'm seeing is not just bad contracts or everybody did shady deals in the 90s. I'm seeing a pattern of people doing work, taking risks, being creative, putting your heart and soul into your careers, putting their lives and reputations on the line, and walking away feeling robbed. Only consistent winner, if these stories are accurate, is Diddy. Finally, we get to the Kirk Barrows lawsuits. Kirk was not some random hanger-on. He was deep in the business. He files a lawsuit that lays out his claims about how he was treated, how money moved, and how decisions were made. To me, that lawsuit is a blueprint. Because when an insider goes on the record under penalty of perjury and says, here's how the deals were structured, here's how I got cut out, here's how the money really flowed, that's no longer gossip. That's evidence. But here's where I want to leave you on episode 2. A cease and desist to Netflix from Diddy, an attorney-client privilege cloud over key conversation. 50 Cent trolling on MSNBC. Roger Bond saying the only reason that footage came out was because Diddy allegedly stiffed somebody on the payment. Stories of artists like Craig Mack, violence swirling around Pac, Suge, Keefe D, Eric Von Zip, Orlando Anderson, and Biggie, and a former business partner, Kirk Barrows, putting it all in black and white in a lawsuit. Is it all true? That's for courts, juries, and history to decide. But if you watch this episode carefully, you can't avoid the question, was this just bad luck and bad contracts? Or was this a whole culture of robbery dressed up as love? I want to hear from y'all in the comments. What stood out to you the most in this episode? Do you believe these insiders? Or do you think law enforcement and the media are spinning the story to make Diddy the ultimate villain? I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay safe out there. Bye.